At this point, the storm is transitioning to more of a downdraft dominant storm. You can see there's very little cloud-based structure here. Most of these clouds are like high-level stratus and altitude. So this storm is going to be gone in about 15 to 20 minutes probably, at least partially gone. And one last shot at of the storm. It's regenerating just a little bit here, getting a new updraft base, but it's probably just about done, I would think.
Well, good evening once again. The reason I show you that video is not to bore you or put up artsy stuff, but to kind of keep you in touch with the motion that we see in the atmosphere. That was just a few hours ago, and we have to be kind of connected with what's going on out there. A lot of the stuff we see visually, like when I worked at Dias in the weather station, I had pilots come up to the counter and they would be kind of shocked that I would go to the window and look outside when I was preparing the flight weather briefings, because, you know, a lot of your nowcasting and your in-depth understanding of what's happening in the atmosphere on a given day is connected with what you see visually. Anyway, hope our sound is okay. I'm doing something different. I brought in a volume mixer, and so I got more buttons to worry about here. If there's something wrong with the audio tonight, please let me know. If there's like clipping or if it's too loud or too soft. Let me take that down just a little bit. Hopefully that's good right there. All right, the meters and everything look okay, so let's get started here. This is the radar for Texas, and these are some of the showers that you were seeing on the time lapse. We saw towering cumulus building earlier in the afternoon, and you saw like a clear line go overhead. That was basically the cloud streets divided into subsidence areas and lift areas. So we had one subsidence area go over, and then we had the next band go overhead right there. What's causing all that? Well, for one thing, it is fall, and we're getting into a very deep easterly flow with high dew points well over 70. And so as a result, we got quite a lot of rain across all of Texas, and some of it's filtering into the higher terrain of the Caprock in Oklahoma. And here's our flow. You can see it shifted more towards an easterly component rather than southeast. So what bearing does it have? I'm not too sure yet. We're going to kind of go through the maps and start putting everything together. Let me switch over to the watch page just so I can make sure that there's not a problem with our audio feed. It's kind of sucked to be out here for 15 minutes in Oklahoma. Be mute. Okay, and here's our flow. Got you can see it's shifted in there with a good volume, so let me move that back. Okay, let's head to the northwest. We're going to do this top-down approach. We're going to pick out strictly the synoptic scale systems, and I'm not talking about like synoptic scale fronts. I'm talking about big weather pattern systems like we covered last night. So what do we have? Across Montana, we've got a very large high that doubtless goes all the way up into northern Canada. So that's one feature right there. There's also, you can see a Pacific high coming on shore. Let me make sure that's in my let me make sure I'm picking that up here. Okay, so there's our Pacific high blowing in cold air. Here's the polar Canadian air blowing air in. And let's see, nothing really in between. What do we expect to find in the desert southwest? If you were here yesterday, you remember that there's a heat low out there. And it's definitely supported by the temperatures out here. There's 104 there at Needles, 102 at Blythe. So very hot air in place. And what that's going to do is that's going to drag Pacific air, there's going to be this northwesterly component coming into that heat low. And to a certain extent, that'll attract a little bit of polar air across the mountains of the Rockies, but there's a lot of blocking going on there. Let's go to the opposite part of the country. We're just kind of jumping between areas here. There's Maine, mid-60s again, but the flow has returned out of the south. So that's a little bit of a change from yesterday. So high pressure, very large high pressure over Maine. That's another feature right there. Nothing I can really see out here, to tell you the truth. And let's go to the southeast. Okay, this is almost certainly being blown in by that polar high well up in Maine. But there's been a lot of air mass modification because we have 80, 81. That's warm, but that's quite a bit cooler than what they would usually see this time of year. So that's some mild air filtering down into the southeast U.S. And then as we go further south, we start picking up more the Bermuda high coming from the Atlantic. So that's another system to keep in mind. There is the Bermuda high. We don't know exactly where that is, probably a few hundred miles, could be a few thousand. But there's this large area of very broad reaching inland. So in Texas and Louisiana, we are mostly under the influence of both the polar high, the modified polar high over Arkansas, and the Bermuda high coming in from Florida. Now, as you might guess, there's probably a little bit of convergence in between. That's certainly something we would look at. That would lead into a front out in this area somewhere. We might want to look for that on the map. So we start with a top down, and then we kind of get an idea where to find fronts. And then we can kind of maybe trace some of that back here in the form of boundaries. So that could be what's helping to trigger some of the activity over Texas. So what do we have in the central U.S.? Let me pull up that sector here. We are under the influence, as you might guess, northeasterly flow from Maine, some recycled air coming from the south and flowing up towards what is apparently low pressure up in Saskatchewan or Manitoba. So most of this is being caused by high pressure very far away, either the Bermuda high or the high up in Maine, the old polar high. So what that means is if we pull up soundings for Illinois or Indiana, we're going to expect to find maybe a weak frontal inversion in the lowest 850 millibars. Let's check that out and see if maybe something like that is showing up. Frontal boundaries or frontal inversions are going to be kind of weak this time of year. They tend to mix out very quickly, but that's kind of the case here in Wilmington. Certainly we have post-frontal air because the surface temperature is only about 75, 76. That's pretty cool. And over here we can see we have west-southwest winds, so there's some recirculated air coming in from the south, and that ultimately probably came in from Virginia and Pennsylvania. So can we find any source of this frontal inversion? Well, there's probably one here over Buffalo. We might have to go very deep into that high pressure area over Maine to really find that. And this is probably a signature of one right here, because you see the characteristic increase of humidity with height. That's a mark of a frontal inversion right there. Above that, this is probably a subsidence high, because that dries as you go up into the inversion. And one last look, Albany. This is 12Z data. That's probably a radiation inversion right there. I'm looking for a good textbook study case, and I'm not really finding one. Things tend to mix out pretty efficiently during the summer. And then as we go into the Southwest deserts, probably one of these, maybe sometime this week, I'll probably go in depth into soundings, maybe At the end of one of these programs, like after the first 10 minutes, I'll probably do an extended 15-20 minute discussion about soundings, and if you want, you can hang on and watch that. That might be Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. We'll see how that plays out, but that'll give you a little bit of a hint as to what we're looking at here. So this will be the last sounding I'll show. This is showing inverted V there in Tucson. So that's what we see in the desert southwest there. Very dry air in the low levels, more humid air in the mid levels, and if we have enough cool air aloft, we can squeak some showers and storms out of that. All right, let's go right ahead and skip ahead. Let's see here. Take a quick look at the satellite loop, or the water vapor imagery. Got a lot of moisture across the south and southeastern U.S., and we can see those areas of showers, one in Louisiana and East Texas and the other in West Texas. And the monsoon itself looks to be pretty inactive. In fact, it looks like there's a low pressure area aloft right there. You see that cyclonic appearance to the flow right there. So what do we have in our forecast? Let's wrap that up real quick. High pressure right there over Virginia. This is 500 millibars up at 18,000 feet. As we go into the start of the work week, we can see that high pressure kind of backing off into Texas and Oklahoma, so that's what's going to dry us out here. And then that builds into a ridge around midweek, around Wednesday or Thursday. So things are going to be warm on the high plains, and then we have this next system coming in from the west that starts breaking down the ridge and kicking it off, and then we start getting some increasing chances of rain in the North Plains next weekend. Looks like a lot of high pressure over Texas and Oklahoma, so probably low chances of rain then. Look at that high pressure there over Louisiana. Hanging in pretty tough there. But it looks like some changes in the weather probably for the Northern Plains and the Great Lakes area. That's saying September 8th or 9th. And one other thing, let's look out in the tropics. This is 250 millibars. You remember yesterday we were looking at some sort of tropical system moving onto the Carolinas coast. Let's see where that is. We were seeing that on the models around the 5th or 6th, right around here in Dominica or Puerto Rico. There it is. But you can see instead of going north, that goes into the Gulf. We kind of lose it there, and then we pick it up there just west of Cuba. So these models, they really tend to waver a lot once you get out past 1 week, 7 or 8 or 9 days. Things are pretty dicey. So we just have to kind of wait and play it by ear and wait until we start getting some consistency between the model runs. But the big thing that we know for now is that there's probably going to be something in the Gulf or off the Florida coast around the first or second week of September. We'll just have to keep an eye on this area. And things will stay kind of active up north and more hot weather for the southern U.S. So that's what we got there. Okay, I think we are done. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow night.